District 1.
Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, June 6, 2023. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 12 o'clock noon. Board member Patrica will be virtually joining us today. We have two items on the agenda. First is the board self-evaluation, and then revisions to protocol manual and committee assignments. The second item on today's agenda will be the agenda review of the June 13th regular action meeting. We'll begin with the board self-evaluation, the revisions to the protocol manual and the committee assignments. Dr. Bernier, would you like to say anything?
I certainly would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome Dr. Savage, our Chief Strategy Officer, who has put his heart and soul into evaluations this year between a superintendent, a school board attorney, and now the board members. I would like to thank Dr. Savage for his work related to this and look forward to hearing more about the evaluation and then your discussion related to it as we think about how to proceed forward. And want to thank Dr. Savage for his service as well as all the board members for your timely completion of your individual work in order to get us to this point. Dr. Savage?
Thank you very much, Superintendent Bernier. And good afternoon, chairpersons, esteemed board members, and also Attorney Dupree Bruno. Today's presentation is to review the results of your self-evaluation process for this year, and to begin the discussion of any initial actions you would like to take relating to those results. So there are two separate PowerPoint decks that we have. This will be the first one taking you through that piece. The second one will then address the protocol manual and the committee assignments. So this is, again, just a reminder of our annual board self-evaluation cycle and where we are within that process. As I mentioned last time I was here, probably the most important part of this process is not the evaluation itself, but any of the actions that the board chooses to take in response to the self-evaluation results, which is the real point of having an evaluation in the first place. You will notice that you really have most of the year to potentially engage in that aspect of improvement-focused work, as well as to enhance the board self-evaluation if you would like to revise the content to reflect ways in which you would like this board to rate itself or otherwise generate improvement. Here are the final milestone dates that we'll be completing this month. I just want to draw your attention to that June 13th. So the information we'll be going over today will actually be on a board action item. This is one of the unique innovations that Dr. Bernier brought as best practices from other districts, having that as something that the board actually takes action on. So that's your self-evaluation will follow suit in conjunction with what you've done for the board attorney as well as the superintendent. With one exception, because this is a board that can only act collectively, this is an opportunity for you collectively to discuss in a way that is very much workshop content related to figuring out how you feel about that, since you all compiled this as individuals. So that's one difference between your evaluation and the superintendents and the board attorneys. So at this time, I'm going to review the high-level results of your self-evaluation with you. Since you all completed this independently, this is your first opportunity to really discuss the results as a group. I would bet that many of you have already reviewed the information that's attached to our meeting, but I still want to draw your attention just in case you haven't had the chance to go in depth. And again, you still have lots of time before the 13th as well to continue to review it beyond just today. We're not going to go through each item in detail, but I do want to at least orient you to the results packet, since I did transition our current instrument. I didn't change any of the content, but I transitioned it to a Google form, and the hope was to make it, number one, an easier process, but secondly, there are some unique benefits to utilizing the Google form technology, and so I want to make sure you have a chance to see what those benefits are. So here is the first thing. You'll notice, for those who have done this before, it's the same format for the cover page, which has the overall scale. And then it goes by standard. There are 4 standards, and it has the individual ratings for each member of the governance team, each board member rather, that compiled this self-evaluation labeled by district. And then it has an overall average. So that cover page gives you, at a very 10,000 level foot view, the overall piece of how you came together, and I consolidate to one page. So your overall rating as a board collectively was a 3.39, which is highly effective. To give you some context, a year ago when this was completed with the prior board, the rating on the same page, if you were to go back and look at the board agenda item, was a 2.44, which yielded a rating of needs improvement. So effectively, in a year's time, the board, through this activity of self-evaluation, has jumped 2 rating levels. So I think it's noteworthy to at least detail that as one piece. However, I want to go to the next page where I've done, if you would like to dig into the deeper, the indicator level of information. I've taken all 7 district responses and put them on one page again as well. So you can see each indicator, its description, as well as how each board member individually rated it and how that average was derived for that indicator. Just to remind you again, like for indicators 1.01 through 1.09, those are all standard 1. So standard 1 is broken into those 9 specific indicators. And I did not change in any way any of the content. That was all taken verbatim from the prior tool. But as I mentioned earlier, you as a board, if there's aspects of this that you would like to tweak or enhance, we certainly could do that. For example, in standard 4, you'll see only 4 indicators. So one thing we tried to do with the superintendent's tool and the board attorney's tool was have the same number of indicators for each standard, so that one standard wasn't necessarily more representative of a deeper breadth or depth than any other standard, that they were equal in that way. This is not set up that way, but you can see those individual ratings. Now, the cool part of using Google that I really like is that it takes those individual ratings and automatically, as a part of its function, generates data visualizations. So for any of you who love data as much as I do, I love seeing it in a picture form. So to be able to see your data expressed as charts like this, that comes automatically, this is one of the unique features, so that you at a very high level can unpack individual indicators and how board members, the spread of how board members rated this. So you can see in this particular case, 1 board member rated a 2, 2 board members rated a 3, and 4 board members rated a 4 on this particular indicator. But you might find others where there's tremendous agreement, like in this particular case, where 5 board members all came together with a 3. So being able to not just see the averages, but also really to understand the pattern of how board members saw this and the uniformity or the lack thereof, those are important things that you can reflect on when pouring through this data. So like indicator 1.03, tremendous alignment as board members that you all came together with a very similar rating on 1.03. Those are the kind of things that data visualizations allow you to do very, very quickly. Meanwhile, there will be others, as I kind of like this one, indicator 106, complete. All 7 members rated the same. So I'm not going to go through each one of these other than just to advise that that's something you could do. What I have done, to go back to our PowerPoint here, is to show you the highest areas and the lowest areas that you've collectively identified. So by standard, and again there are 4, the 2 standards that had the highest overall average rating collectively as a board were in the realm of policy and stakeholder engagement. You can see the ratings listed as so. For indicators, the 3 highest scoring indicators were 2.01, 2.02, and 4.02. The 2 highest, 2.01 and 2.02, were near perfect scores, 3.9 average rating. So those are the highest you can get as a 4. So that really shows that the board was remarkably aligned. These are real strengths of the board, as well as providing stakeholder input, which was the 3rd highest at a 3.7. I always like to focus on opportunities for improvement. But before I get into the specifics of opportunities for improvement, I just want to highlight to you that still your overall average in this area, even though they were the lowest areas, is still over 3. So that shows that they're still remarkable. That's still a pretty powerfully high rating, but that's why it's important to see the relative, how these indicators relate, because of the board, these are areas that you still demonstrated were not quite as strong as we could be. And that's when we start looking at things like professional development. These become ripe opportunities to think, okay, what are best practices related to this as a district or as a governance team? And so the 2 standards that came up with the lowest 2 ratings, again, there were only 4 standards, so strategy and governance. Now, interestingly, the lowest scoring indicator that you rated, the only one that went below a 3.0, was 4.05, which is the board uses a variety of communication tools to inform stakeholders about district performance. So as the lowest scoring area, that's definitely an opportunity to unpack and have some rich discussion about what yielded that type of rating. What as a board made you think that this is an opportunity for improvement? The others that are clustered together, 1.06, 03, and 08, these deal really with you as a governance team. So even though your overall standard 1 was a pretty high rating, these 3 areas in particular were demonstrated as areas that the board has self-identified for improvement. So one is preparation for meetings. The second is board members respecting the distinction between the role of the board and the superintendent. And then the third in that particular standard is that the board is regularly participating in professional development. So those 3 all fall within the same standard area, and those are the lowest ratings. You also notice there's a lot more here. Well, I still only wanted to give you the lowest 3 areas, but there was a tie, and so I included all the tied items of the 3.1. The last one that I didn't individually listed were that lowest scoring standard, which was strategy, and those were indicators 3.02, 03, 05, and 06. But they're all similarly themed around how the board conducts its strategy to be effective. So those are some areas that I just wanted to quickly highlight for you. Now, before I open things up to the superintendent and the board discussion, I just want to remind board members that while this specific workshop today was set aside as time to annually discuss professional development, you are not limited in the ability to discuss professional development only to this meeting. In fact, it's highly appropriate for you to reference at future meetings your self-evaluation at any time, your professional learning. These are things that are intended not to be a moment in time, but to be things you can refer back to and say, remember how we rated, and justify this type of professional development course of action that you could schedule out even for the whole year and revise at any time. This meeting, though, today just ensures that the bare minimum of policy of what you've established as a governance team is met, and you have memorialized this occasion today. So before I ask the board, I just want to give the superintendent one more opportunity to add anything as your chief executive, to react to any of this, but then we really hope to have some board member discussion. But Superintendent Bernier, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we involve the board discussion?
Thank you, Dr. Savage. I appreciate the transfer back. Really, at this time, I'm very interested in what the board has to communicate, and I'm interested in how our work revolving around strategic planning and how that strategic plan refresh might lead to additional portals and ways to communicate some of the staff's action and your support and how we're making a difference for the students and families of the greater Lee County area. So looking forward to your discussion.
All right, board members, any discussion here? Mr. Fisher?
I have actually a question, Chair, through you to the superintendent and Dr. Savage, possibly. You had indicated last year, or about last year's board in regards to their score and going through this. What happened after that? Was there any kind of, did they set any goals, and was any of that achieved? Any, just kind of what the process was last year, if there's any follow-up on that? Thank you.
Dr. Savage?
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Yes, I'm happy to respond. So the evaluation last year occurred in May, and so while they did have the specific ratings, there was no defined plan for professional development that was established. That's not to say there couldn't have been. I think because there was also a transition in superintendents, that was on the mindset of really wanting to benefit from the best practices that the new superintendent, at that time, Dr. Bernier they knew Dr. Bernier had been selected. So I think there was an opportunity to try to coalesce around that way of work and see that he could also help inform priorities to help improve the overall governance. But I would defer also to the members of the governance team that were in place, that were there. I don't want to over summarize what your discussion was, but if you're free to add, I would ask back to the chair that the members who were here could also respond.
Ms. Jordan?
We did have some training, and that was Mr. Bruno had put that together for the board and some participated and some did not. But and actually Dr. Savage was part of that one training that we did as well. And that was, it was like almost a week, but we really try to pull everybody together and have that conversation, what do we do to be better? How do we see one another as individuals with different ideas, but still, be respectful to one another? And so that did take place. And again, not everyone participated, because you can, it's hard to force somebody to be there. But it was open to all and encouraged for everybody to be there and to participate. So it was more than one training. Am I right, Ms. Morgan?
I wish I could remember. I do remember Attorney Dupuy Bruno doing some work with the board, but I also think that to a certain extent we had a new superintendent. We were looking for guidance in terms of his expectations of way of work with the board, and we also anticipated, frankly, a new board. So, I think we were pretty content to just try to work on individual relationships and stop there.
Okay. Any more comments, Mr. Fisher?
Not at this moment. I may come back.
Ms. Jordan, do you have anything?
I'm sorry, I'm still thinking.
I can move on.
Pass, please. Thank you.
Ms. Fleming?
If we could go back to that slide, that was maybe slide 6, thank you. Right there, yeah. I'm not surprised by the results of this, and I'm actually pleased with how highly we were rated, especially only being a board of, not quite we didn't even get to serve together yet as a full school year. So that's positive and a great, I'm sorry, I'm hearing so much feedback, but if we look at the indicators where we can improve, because I'm always about where can we be better. It's okay to be good, but I think we need to strive for greatness. So when I look at a 2.9 average, 3.0, while that doesn't seem low, we always know that there's room to improve there. I did notice that many folks with the 4.05, the board used a variety of communication tools to inform stakeholders about district performance. I think that's something that's a great call out. I don't have any suggestions at this time. I'm kind of like Ms. Jordan, I need to let this marinate for a second, but it's great to go through a process like this and an evaluation process, kind of see where we are landing right now, but without discussion and without thinking how are we going and talking about how we're going to improve. Going over results doesn't get you far, right? So the whole point in data is, okay, how are we going to change this? So I look forward to any ideas that the board members may have, or members of superintendent or the cabinet, on how the board uses a variety of communication tools to inform stakeholders about district performance. What are some other communication tools out there that we could use, that we could utilize? And the all board members are prepared for meetings. That was the only one that was a little surprising, I guess. I think we've had great flow of board meetings and kind of knowing where we're headed. I think it's really important that we respect each other's time, being prompt to everything, which is part of preparation. But other than that, I just wanted to call out that I'm excited to talk about this, but I think we need to definitely, whether it's a training or something further than that. We definitely need to use the results of this evaluation process and do something with it, not just go through it and leave it here. So.
Ms. Morgan?
So first of all, I'd thank Dr. Savage for changing the form and doing the data, because we've always struggled on where we drop the pin to have the discussion, and you've pretty much delineated where we need to have the conversation. So that's a significant improvement over our past efforts to get through this self-evaluation. I would say with respect to the communication tool piece, I think our biggest problem is that, well, I won't say it's a problem, our greatest opportunity, because I think we do a fairly good job of generating generic communication to everybody, but I think more targeted communication, and specifically, I want to say, well, I'm just going to say more targeted information with respect to, I don't know, a student performance, school performance, demographic, issues of demographic concern. The people who, we're getting to everybody, but most people are not paying attention to what we send out because they're generally happy. It's the people who are unhappy who are speaking to us about, what we're communicating. But I think we can do a better job of getting the community on board with our work if we generate information that engages them in our work. For example, if we have a particular program highlighting the impact of a particular program on student achievement. Something, I don't know, I'm just rambling. Let somebody else talk. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Ms. Jordan?
No, but I think Ms. Morgan is right. And I always think about this too when I'm because I know we really do try really hard to make sure that we are getting out there to every single person possible. I mean, that has always been our goal. And can we improve on everything? Of course, every day we wake up, there's something we can improve on or stay asleep. But as far as, and I think about that when I'm at these performances and it's jammed packed, the room is jam packed. It's like, this to me is always a lost opportunity to share. And then making sure that we control the narrative of what's being said out there in the community as well. So a lot of times, things get out there and they're not answered to the liking of one person or the next person, but for us to continue making sure that, we hold to that, whatever that narrative is, and speak on, bless you, and speak on the, all the good things we are having, because people want to hear those as well. So you can do a good and a need. So these are the great things we're doing, but we also need this, because then I think you can capture more ears because they're listening to what's the good things that's happening, but then always put that other stuff, whatever we need, in there. And try to use the schools for things that we really need to push out, even if it's not before a show, standing up there and, breaking their excitement, but having something that they can, take in their hands or whatever that may look like. And I know since I've been here, we've been really trying hard to make that work, to try to be out in the community. And I know all of us try to be out there as much as we possibly can and to speak on the district. And I think we have to continue to make sure that we are the steward of that and the voice that's bringing out who we are in the district.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. I rated this as actually one of our strengths, and it depends for me what you're looking at as communication tool. I feel that as a board, like Ms. Jordan said, we are getting out there. A lot of us, and I try to do this, will engage parents or students or community members will go and, talk at different organizations, and we'll see, we'll talk about what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses and what do we need to work on and input. And so from my understanding, I said that's how I was looking at it, communication, especially a lot of one-on-one or small groups or things like that. So, even today when I was over to a school before the ceremony, I don't even know what to call it, Dr. B. There was parents there. We had some discussions of, just kind of things going on and what's things at and we're looking at. So, I see that as a strength. Maybe I misinterpreted that. So I'm not looking at it as just emails. I know a lot of us as well, social media as well, those kind of things. This is kind of incumbent on us as the board. I wasn't looking at this question as what is the district doing? So I was looking at how, as a board, how are we members, how are we doing that? So I felt that was more of a strength with that. So, thank you.
Right. Dr. Savage, I just want to thank you also for making it so simple to see here. I know on my ratings, I just went from, obviously, when I'm on the board, and I'm sure probably Mr. Fisher and Mrs. Fleming here did also. It was hard to look back as a candidate and have seen some things and not to block all that out. In my opinion, everybody had a fresh start, and I liked everything. As far as the communication, I know one thing I do that's, I think, very good is I share the Facebook page of the district. I know some of y'all are not on Facebook, but they have some fantastic articles all the time and events and everything else of what's great on our district. And if you are on Facebook, I would strongly suggest that. The one-on-ones, as Mr. Fisher said, is excellent. I know I'm out in the community a lot, and I see Miss Jordan everywhere I go. So she's there, and I often see the others at all these events, and people say, well, you're just out at events having fun. No, you're meeting the people, you're talking to them, and getting to know what's going on, which is very important. Probably the weakest point, and it's just because of the way it's set up, is answering emails. Most of the emails we get, we can't do anything about it because it's operations, and we forward them on to the superintendent, who's doing a very good job at then assigning someone to follow up from that point. I don't know if we should also maybe engage them some on that. I have not been doing that, I'll admit that. I just follow up with the superintendent to make sure it's being looked at, and it usually is. It always has been, actually, I shouldn't say usually. So I think a lot of people think if you don't contact them personally with something that you really can't control, other than to say that, thank you for sending it to me, and we're going to forward this and send it on, may be perceived a weak point. Maybe we can come up with a little better answer to that, because I do get a slew of emails every day, and I'm sure everybody else does also, and I wouldn't mind doing that, but I don't want to say what should be done when it's not really our job to be doing it. That's all I'm trying to say there. All right. Yes, Mr. Fisher?
I still had some comments. If we're
No, go ahead. Please, continue.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, looking through this, for me, and I don't know about the others that are all over the board, it was harder for me to kind of establish what a baseline was too. So, I know the ones that have been on the board can probably see that a little bit easier. So I'm just trying to, as I said, like Mr. Person said, base it on, from when the new board was seated as a whole. So I think we're doing well. By no means that doesn't mean that we don't need improvement in a lot of areas. So I think one of the things that this board as a whole, I appreciate the professionalism, the positivity. And positivity, I think, has been misunderstood as meaning we're not going to address issues that are in district. It means trying to show the great things about this district and things that happen day in and day out. Students, teachers, employees. I think that's very important that we continue, each of us, to carry that message. So, but as I said, overall, a lot of it, and, I've mentioned this to Dr. Bernier and stuff, and in some ways, we as a board have had to do a little bit of rebuilding, to put it nicely. So, and a lot of it relationships and community and those things. And I think we're doing a good job of that. We still have some work to do on that, but combined with superintendent and administrative staff, I think we're heading in the right direction for that. So, looking at some of the stuff, communication always can be better. As I said, I feel that we're all respecting each other up here, that we're willing to have, differences of opinion and not jump on each other. I think that's very important. So I'm trying to think of some different methodologies and different things that we can kind of look at. Ultimately, as I said, I know we look for feedback. I know those of the administration, the audience, I'm always asking them to make sure to point out something. I know others are doing that as well, so that's important. So, I want to keep doing that, and I hope we do that as a whole. Besides that, I'm just trying to think of some different ways. I don't know, maybe things that boards have done in the past. Ultimately, this is good for a constructive phase. Ultimately, it does for the board come down to the residents and the voters. It comes down to that, but it's important that we can address whatever's internally and how we can work on stuff. So I'm kind of trying to see if we're open to I don't know, I said whatever changes we can make. I think maybe just readdressing some of this in, perhaps a month and seeing progress and things like that. But thanks.
Before I turn it back over to the superintendent here. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, so somebody sparked a thought. We did at one time try to set up a speakers bureau, and when you think back on the sales tax, the slide deck that we went out with, we were all providing exactly the same message throughout the community. And I think we need to get back to the notion of the Speakers Bureau with a slide deck that basically says to every single Rotary, every single Kiwanis, we would like annually to have the opportunity to come speak to your group and talk about, what we've accomplished, like the state of the schools, but make it, a little deeper into the community. I think, thank you. I think that, I apologize, everybody. I'm going back to what I was saying about trying to engage the broader community in our work and understand what our work is and the difference that we're making. I think getting back to the notion of a speaker bureau where we're all out there talking to essentially opinion leaders in the community would be helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Jordan.
I agree 100% with Ms. Morgan on that, because I know I've been speaking about doing that forever. I think that is something that we should be doing. The city councils do that. The wards do it all over Fort Myers. I attend all their meetings. And when I'm sitting there, and I go because I want to hear it, just in case they have any comments or concerns about the district or they mention it, there's always a person that's going to be there to hear that and bring it back. And they will have 100 people there. So it's like, if you can do this in all the wards in the city, and the Cape, they do it separately, the different council people. So why can we not do that? What is it that we're not, how come we can't figure that out? And I can't figure it out. It's been driving me nuts for years. But I think that that's something, and I know that Dr. B has gone out and has done a great job in doing that in his first 100 days, being out all over the community. But I think that we still need to get this little like quality of life, these little areas that we know that they're going to have a captive audience, because once a month all the parents have to go there. So we could go there or find where these people are at so we can go to them and bring the information to the people. So I love that. I do. Thank you.
I just want to say that this board has tackled several big issues, starting obviously with Ian, and then the issues that came from that, Hector Caparato, what are we going to do there? We decided to make it a K-8. The Fort Myers Beach Elementary, to start off with the two-phase rebuilding, the proximity plan, and then the Guardian program. We're going to have a huge coming up, the budget is going to be a big thing getting ready to come up. And then all the policies. So the board has come together. Those are a lot of big issues to have tackled in just this short amount of time, and they'll be ongoing. So, Dr. Bernier, would you like to add anything to this?
I think I would go back to my comments in the state of the schools that talk about that we are now legitimately focused through the strategic refresh, which we're excited about bringing forward at the briefing in June. We are more focused than ever on being a world-class learning organization that allows students to reach his or her fullest potential. Those words now resonate with me because I have a better understanding of where each one of you stand. But I think when I hear communication, I think we have to be better as a public school system in telling our story. I agree that I think speakers bureaus and getting, standardized PowerPoints for the staff to prepare and give to you as a board member to utilize will be very helpful. And I know Dr. Savage has been writing furiously and taking notes. But generally with communications as well, while we have a fabulous department, I don't think we are always feeding them all the best information that could tell our story the best. We are certainly entering a new period in public education within the state of Florida, and we are going to have to compete like we never have before for students, and we must tell our story effectively so the parents understand that we truly are their best option. That gets into market differentiators. What makes us different than some other choices that are available? What makes us better? What does our product look like leaving our system, and where do they go? We probably should, though maybe sometimes, I think Facebook would be a great place to put it in this modern age, but I'm still tied to my newspaper. I still like to read one and fold one on a Sunday. But why isn't there a half page or a full page ad about where our graduates are going and really advertising where our students are off to and the amazing opportunities they have, like the young man who was at the last board meeting who's headed to West Point. Really taking that extra effort. One of the things I was talking to Dr. Carlin about, and we will be searching, unfortunately due to her retirement, we'll be searching a replacement. But one of the things that will be part of that process is how do we tell that story better? And very specifically, how do we tell the story at the end of every board meeting? I know we release board minutes, but that is not a standardized communication of the advertisement of the hard work that goes on at this board dais. It seems recently like the meetings have been flowing very well and we get done in a pretty good amount of time, but we're not always telling the great story of, with your actions, what now will happen? What are we now going to do? And chairpersons, I appreciate, entry technology, Guardian program, but there should be almost a board recap after every board business meeting that tells the community this is what you may have watched the meeting, but if you haven't read all the agenda items, these are 3 to 4 highlights that come out of every meeting that's going to make the world a better place for your children, academically, physically, transportation-wise. So I think it's a matter of us having the time to sit down and talk about that. I think the other piece that I didn't hear, I heard some about, is professional development. And I can be better about asking what you need within our one-on-ones. What are you looking for as a board member? What do you want to develop around? What are some things that you feel, because everybody's got strengths, right? But everybody has an area that they want to work on. And in some cases, depending on which researcher you listen to, you're better sometimes monopolizing your strengths and training those to be even stronger, and then realizing that there's another member of the board who fills that gap for you with another piece or another viewpoint. So I think as we look to professional development, I think we have to look not only at our local school boards association, but we also have to begin to look potentially nationally at what other school boards across this entire nation are struggling with and working with, and how do we help build your network of people and persons in facing a difficult decision. And again, Mr. Person's a great job. Fort Myers Beach, Hector Caffaretta, Not a lot of people have gone through that work. I can assure you that your phones will ring this hurricane season if it lands somewhere else, and that community is facing some of the same decisions. Be prepared, because they're going to reach out to you. But how do they know you're here? They know you're here through the networking that you do with other board members, so, and other boards across this state and nationally. So those are some other ideas that I have to bring to the process, and we can discuss more in one-on-ones, and I can work with Dr. Savage to see what that can look like for all of you. And again, it's very personal. When you think about professional development at this level, it's almost a prescribed plan for each one of you. So looking forward to helping you differentiate that, and then looking forward to working with our current comms team and the amazing people that just fixed Ms. Fleming's microphone without ever stepping out. They changed the volumes and they got that feedback fixed, but also working with them, looking towards the future of how can we even tell our story even better.
Do we have Ms. Patrica on the phone? Ms. Patrica, would you like to make some comments? I'm sorry to have ignored you. Are you there?
Yeah,
Technology. Ms. Patrica, we cannot hear you. Give you a minute here.
Yeah, it's intermittent, it's breaking up.
Yep. All right, Ms. Patrica, go ahead, try again.
I have no comments, thank you.
All that for that. Thank you, Ms. Patrica. Okay, let's move on, seeing no other, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fisher.
Real quick, I agree with what Dr. Bernier said, but this is sometimes why I may drive Dr. Savage and Attorney Dupree Bruno a little crazy on these evaluations. I was looking at 4.05 as communications as us, just as a board, not as a district, so I agree. So that's what I sometimes have that problem when I'm looking at these, what I'm evaluating. So that's how I was looking at that. I agree exactly with what you said, but I'm trying to look at it just from our aspect, not just as districts. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Ms. Jordan.
And just one last thing. The recap of the board meeting, I think that's an excellent idea. I know Ms. Morgan used to do that all the time at the end, because you know how she says that by the time you get to her. So at the end, she would say, do you understand, during this time, we just voted on this. And so when you hear all that, you're like, wait a second, yes, that's exactly what we just did. And you can see that the audience and the community, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, because you may read it, but you're not really comprehending all that until you hear it. So thank you. And I always ask Ms. Morgan, I'm like, you do a great job of this, Ms. Morgan. You should do it every meeting. And then I love the fact that Dr. B had spoke about the strengths of each other. And I know I even had told Ms. Fleming when we were at the strategic, I looked for her guidance in education because you've been there. So that to me, helps us along the way of what we need to make everything work. So thank you.
Any other comments? Mrs. Giovanelli, would you?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Computer issues.
No problem. Okay, let's move on to the revisions to the protocol manual and committee assignments. Dr. Savage?
Thank you, Chairman Persons.
Before you, may I? So are we going to look at, so we've had a little bit of a discussion with this, are we going to come back in after like a month and look to see where we're at on this? Because we haven't come up with anything that we said we're going to work on. So it gives us time. Is that what we're looking at doing?
I think we need to, one, look at our schedule. Somewhere along over the summer, I think before the summer is over, we should maybe come back
Evaluate again.
and do that, unless on our one-on-ones as superintendent offered to help
Okay.
on that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Dr. Savage.
No, please, I actually really appreciate that. Thank you very much, and again, just to welcome Ms. Juvenile as well, and just chairpersons and board members, Dr. Bernier, Attorney Dupuy Bruno. This particular segment, the second half of our presentation, is going to focus on the revisions to the board protocol manual, as well as annually, or at least annually, the committee assignment process for this upcoming school year. So this is just, again, a reminder of our high-level overview of the annual activity related to the manual update and where we're at in the process. I do want to remind the board again that you're free to take action on this really at any time of the year. But again, June, similar to the other piece, this is just the time that's presently set aside for this activity. And I will offer that June is a very busy time period. So that said, this approach can easily be amended to sequence with other milestones at the board's discretion. Just to paraphrase one particular hot topic that's been mentioned numerous times was the board committee assignments coming a bit sooner after an election as one example of something the board has discussed previously. That the thought process being that folks who are newly elected sometimes are then beholden to serve in committees that they may not have otherwise selected, and so that can have some interesting aspects to it. So that's just one example of how that could be looked at. One benefit of adopting a new bylaw that references this manual as a controlling document is that the board has the discretion to ask to have the document amended at any time. So while the new bylaw will officially acknowledge this manual as guiding it doesn't have to go through the same rulemaking process because this document itself is not adopted. It's that policy that's adopted. So that gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of amending this at any time. But I just want to remind you that even though we do it on an annual basis, if there's something about the manual that is concerning to you, that is, you can absolutely bring that up and direct that type of work at any time. I just want to also kind of make sure I recap again. I think I did this last time, but I really want to make sure I do it again, that the bylaws really are designed to help inform the board on its way of work. This manual really then is designed to assist and enhance that, but they should work completely together. There should be no contradictions. The manual doesn't supersede it. It really is just intended very much in the way that procedures do to clarify beyond the policy level, which sometimes doesn't get into the weeds. The protocol manual is designed to get into the weeds and make sure that all sides have fair expectations on all sides. I will just say, just as a matter of adopting this work and these reviews that were done, I worked within the existing structure of the existing manual. I would tell you that I think the manual probably could be significantly streamlined, much in the way that the board thought the code of conduct could be streamlined. I think there is always an opportunity to enhance, to make it a better guiding document, especially in light of the fact that you now have these new bylaws, but just for ease of trying to maintain what people were familiar with in the past, I really honored the existing structure of the manual, but that's not to say that we couldn't continue to really revise it and streamline it in that way as well. So I just want to make sure I mention that too. But most importantly, want to make sure the content in the manual is aligned with your bylaws, which are being adopted at the end of this month, anticipated those bylaws being adopted at the end of this month. Here again are the specific milestone dates for this year so that you have all those deadlines on one page. This helps to ensure you're prepared for each phase of this process, especially when there's so many different processes going on. I always want to try to give you those high-level overviews and then specific milestone dates. So at the end of this month, the board may choose to adopt what will be known as Policy 0120, and that is the policy I was referencing that recognizes this manual as a controlling document. At that time, when that bylaw goes into effect, then that's when essentially this new manual would take over our existing manual. So there's that alignment. You'll also notice that while the hyperlinks within the current manual, the draft that you have in the agenda today, they won't link to those policies because they haven't been adopted yet. At the time that all the policies go into effect, then all those things will be hyperlinked. The idea is that if you have that manual saved, you simply can click on it, it'll take you right to the policies you want to see. We can't do that now because those policies haven't been adopted yet, so there's no way to link it to it, but that's something that you will see and you can reasonably anticipate. There's always going to be continued updates in form if we catch typos, things like that. We'll fix those things, but always when there's a substantive thing like that, I really want to make sure the board's always aware of it. And just to also mention, you know, you are free to the superintendent or to the board attorney or to whomever the superintendent directs. If you want collectively as a board to change any aspect of it, you simply have to state that at any meeting in which you're working so that we know that that is to happen. Or even in the one-to-ones if you have suggestions for the superintendent or the board attorney of things you'd want clarified. All right, so just to, before we get into the different type of edits, you've had about a month to contribute feedback. There was a significant level of feedback provided, which was excellent. Most of it I was able to just implement, and that was, hopefully you'll see that reflected in there. There were a few things that maybe are not, they're things that the board probably should weigh in on as matters of things that perhaps you want to clarify, because the manual's done, it's for you. It's to guide you collectively. So if there's aspects in there that you think there are procedures that you as a board are not following, that may be because you as a board don't want us to have that in there, and you certainly are free to direct that. At the other side, if it's something the board feels like you absolutely want to honor that, but you don't know that it's happening with the regularity that you think it should, then that's also something that the board needs to reflect on and think about if you really want that as a rule, or if how do you want to norm that process. So let me give you a good example. One of the pieces of feedback I received was around cell phone use at the dais. What's the appropriate use of cell phones at the dais? There isn't necessarily a national best practice that I could take and bring to you today to say this is what the national bodies that work with boards say you should do. It's an evolving area. So like, for example, as a matter of business, we may be corresponding with the superintendent via our phone so that he can get the message he needs to do his business. But that's not necessarily what the board is referencing in their thought process when they devised this as part of the protocol manual. What they were trying to do is limit outside potential force or personal business being conducted at the dais. And so very clearly you can see written in the protocol manual that if folks have to handle personal business, which anyone may have to do, they are expected to step outside, handle their business, come back in and join the meeting, but be perfectly engaged at the moment of. That's something, the type of feedback that I did not feel it would be appropriate for me to unilaterally make any edits to that language, because that really is something for the board collectively to decide what you would like it to be. And again, you don't have to decide that today, but that's just an example of the type of thing that if you see something in the manual that maybe doesn't match up against your current practice, or you have other considerations that you want to voice, then you as a board can do that. And so I just wanted to take this one moment to highlight that as one particular type of feedback that I wouldn't have implemented, but it's worth mentioning that that's something you as a board can talk about. Okay. So I just want an opportunity to open things up for the board discussion. I'll again defer back to the superintendent first if there's anything he wants to add. But before we do that, before we get to committee assignments, because that's its own separate, unique situation. And so I want to just give a chance for the board to discuss any aspect of either what I've said or any of the edits that you've noticed that have been made in that draft manual thus far. But before I do that, Superintendent Bernier, is there anything else you'd like to add, sir?
No, Dr. Savage, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
All right, board members, do you have any edits to the protocol right now or discussion this morning?
Yeah, for discussion, we hold all responses to public comment to the end of the meeting. And I would like to have a conversation about the opportunity providing the opportunity for the superintendent and or the board attorney to respond at the conclusion of public comment, just because with respect to, the board can comment on its policies, its practices, whatever, at the end of the meeting. They can comment on the meeting. But I worry that we leave some of these accusations, some of these comments hanging for an extended period of time. People leave, people turn off their TV, whatever. And I think, I just would like to have the opportunity to have a discussion about when is the best time for the board attorney and the superintendent to respond to very specific comments made during public comment. Thank you.
Okay. the timing of public comment also. I mean, some people do all public comment at the end of a meeting. It's some different ones I've been to, you know, then everybody is there. Everything gets, so that's, I don't know. Does anyone have any ideas on that? I mean, I'm not making a motion or anything, just on responding. Yes, Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, I mean, from a communication informational standpoint, perhaps it would be good, but on some of the individual ones, I mean, how would the superintendent pick and choose? Because some of it might not be best to maybe address everyone at that moment, I should say, is probably the best way. I mean, I would be on board with it in regards to, yeah, you know, perhaps the superintendent, you know, doing a brief thing. I know they do in other ones. I know the city of Cape Coral does it that way, so, but, I mean, I would be on board with that, so.
Ms. Jordan, did you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I think that sometimes we go on with the meeting and people are sitting there going, what the heck just happened? Or because we don't have an answer for them, so they are waiting for a response. And even though what Mr. Fisher just said, it's hard when you start picking and choosing the individual people, but if it's something that really pertains to the district, and again, that's us making sure that we are controlling the narrative. So, and if that's something that is, we have several people speaking on the same matter, and even perhaps the chair at that time could, because you have the opportunity to speak to them, would then direct or hand it over to the superintendent or to Mr. Pri-Bruno to respond to that for clarification. Maybe is a better word.
Ms. Morgan?
So what I'm really thinking in response to what Mr. Fisher said, all it requires is the superintendent to say, I have heard a comment made to this effect, and I am directing so-and-so to respond to the individual who raised the question, period. You don't have to discuss what the nature is, what the resolution is, but I would like to hear from the superintendent and the board attorney, you know, how they feel about how we handle our responses or their responses to public comment.
Thank you.
Ms. Jordan?
And again, to what Ms. Morgan just said, and I know Dr. B does this, before people are, and we see it because we're sitting here and we're watching and observing. So the minute someone says something there, he already has that in his head, you can see. Then you see staff getting up and going directly to the person. We all see that taking place, us. So we know that's happening and we're addressing that issue, but no one else knows that. So to them, it's like, oh, they're just speaking and nobody hears, nobody cares. But in actuality, the parts are already being moved just from him sitting right here. Yeah.
So I will defer to the legal staff for the legal aspect of what we can or cannot say, but I would share with you that in specific situations that we've had this year, I think addressing it at the end of the meeting has been a positive change from when I first was beginning to interview and looking at former board meetings where it seemed like it was never addressed. So I do appreciate the opportunity that the board members have afforded me, as we've taken copious notes through each speaker, the opportunity to address it. It does also concern me at times that we are speaking very much to an empty chamber at that point. I know that that's not really seen necessarily on TV at the time or on the closed circuit, but I want to be sure on the live stream. I want to be sure that people understand. I think there are some avenues with which to address some of the concerns immediately. What you have taught me over the course of a year is there's certain things I can speak to right away, I can certainly assign staff. Thank you, Mrs. Jordan, and other board members who've said to me, you've recognized that work. Some people come and talk about ESE. You'll see Dr. Duncan and you'll see Ms. Bowen and other people up, and we'll work with that parent. I have an expectation that we deliver customer service at that point, and the parent knows who their point of contact is before leaving the chamber, who they could contact beginning tomorrow, set up meetings, and continue to move forward. A lot of times that is our chief of staff who helps me assign and work to ensure that people are getting that response. I think there are some specific situations that are very unique to a specific student. And while we can address it at a level, it can't be really addressed fully from this particular location. So I think, but to address that it's been heard and that staff will be contacting them, I think we can do that. I think we can. I can cover myself by always remembering two things: overpromise and underpromise and overdeliver. And thank God I got it right. Underpromise and overdeliver. And the aspect of, if you don't know something, then you don't know, and you're not in a position to be able to respond to it at this time, but we will have staff look into the matter and make sure that we get that individual or you as board members the responses that you need. So I think somewhere in the meeting that opportunity to address it could be beneficial, and that could go back to an earlier statement about the board's, the board communicating. Maybe it would, but I don't know what the rules and regulations are. So now that I've opened my mouth, now my attorney's going to tell me what I can and can't do. Our attorney, sorry.
I agree with Dr. Bernier and what he stated. I think probably having it right after the public comment so that the individuals can actually hear what the response is, if we are able to respond. If we're not able to respond, we can explain why we're not able to respond. Obviously, with certain things that fall under the legal realm, we may not be able to, but I think it will help, and I agree with him as well, based on your prior discussion in terms of communication with stakeholders. And it will also, I think, alleviate some of those fill in the gaps when you don't have the information and you kind of create your own story. So I think it will be a good idea for Dr. Bernier, and when necessary, I respond to some of the comments that are made.
Ms. Jordan?
So that would be going back to, even when I was chair, if I was responding, I did not have the answer, I would refer to either one of you, which is what he certainly could do, and then that way he controls that.
I was going to say, I could add it to the script after they're done with public comment. Would you like to respond to anything at this point? Are you able to? Something like that. I'm going to ask either one of you. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Ms. Morgan's proposal in regards to that, the formal acknowledgement part especially. So that when I was talking about picking or choosing Dr. Bernier, elaborate on that just for if there's sensitive student issues. That's what I was talking about in regards to that, but I would support that.
Okay. Everybody, yes, Ms. Fleming.
I agree. I've noted before that it seems by the time we get to public comment and then to the comment questions, just like Dr. Bernier stated earlier, it's an empty chamber at that point. Even though our meetings seem to be flowing quickly and on some nights and longer on others, but when you have, whether it be 8 people or 58 people that come in with their own concerns, it's important for me as a board member, I want to hear all of them. But by the time we get to where we're able to make a statement or let the constituents know we have heard you, many of them have left for multiple reasons. It's late at night, they've got to get home to their family, they've got to go to work maybe. But I think it would be nice whether public comment remained in the same place during the meeting as it already is, and then make the opportunity available to the super and the board attorney, or move comment to the very end of the meeting after all of, whichever case it may be. I do think there needs to, I completely support an opportunity to communicate to whoever came to speak that night very shortly after they have already spoken, rather than waiting till the very end.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see it remain where it is and then just add that rather than at the end. Make everybody wait around would be
Sure.
a little bit, a lot. Okay, any further discussion on that? Ms. Giovanelli?
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be totally at the discretion of the superintendent, and I respect that and understand that. And I think the sooner than later is always better. So thank you, Ms. Morgan, for bringing that up. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Savage, please continue.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Okay, so we have made it through that phase, and we are now on to the committee assignment phase, which this will be my first time facilitating this process, but I went back and watched Ms. McClung do this process just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly and how she went about doing it. So the first thing that you'll notice is that this is a little bit less formalized than some of the other processes. And I was also asked, just one point of feedback, I believe it was Ms. Patrica a couple months ago said, how is this working for staff? I did bring that up to staff to get any feedback, as well as just the board staff. And one thing that did come forward was just that as people are making decisions about which committees they want to participate on, to really think about the availability and scheduling, so that if you're not aware of when a particular committee meets or how frequently they meet, there's nothing wrong with asking and saying before a topic may is of interest, to really think about the scheduling side. And so just having that conversation as a board, the board members who are currently participating or have previously participated tend to have some pretty good insight into that piece. So just to give you a quick overview of what this process will look like. Excuse me. The first thing you'll notice when I pull up the form is there are some automatic 2-year term appointments. These are simply committee assignments that have a defined period that says it must be 2 years. So that really doesn't then invite any discretion. So that happens right away. You'll see that evidenced by the names will already be placed in that position. All I would ask is if there's any errors in the forms that have been done, that you just clarify that for me so I can update accordingly. The second sweep of this will be the first right of refusal. The best is the best way I can describe this. And so what this essentially, for our new board members, allows you to do, if you are a currently seated board member in your first year of your work, the way that the board has done this, and again, all this is at the board discretion. So while this is the existing process, that does not mean that the board collectively could not say, we don't like that, we want to change things. I'm just summarizing to you what has occurred. So the way this works for the second year first right of refusal is that I go down the list in order and ask the board member who is presently in the first year of their particular year if they would like to continue. And I think the theory of action behind that was that as a board member participates, they start to gain an understanding of who are the members of this committee, what is the nature of the work of it, how can they best support it, and that there's some benefit of continuity as well as maybe mutual interest, that the board member really deepens their understanding, they can add more value because they know what the last year's body of work and can continue in that respect. And respectfully, that's the best that I could discern as to why that practice exists. But a person can also bow out. Just because they've signed up to do it, they can very much say, I really learned a lot, but I think I'd love the opportunity for someone else to take that journey from me. And so if they do that, then that becomes an opening. At the end, once we've passed through the entire list of the first right of refusals, then that yields a list of open spots for board members to consider. Or sometimes a board member says, I would like to step away from that committee, and I'd like to open up for my colleagues. That's when this more or less formal discussion essentially occurs, and the board's members, for lack of a better word, haggle over what they would like to see fit. Now, that's not to say that it has to continue that way. Similar to how you vote for chair, vice chair, you could do formal nomination procedures. I mean, Robert's Rules provides for lots of opportunity. But because this was handled so peaceably in the past, I wanted to summarize that as a facilitator especially, it's a little nerve-wracking to go into it knowing that you're honoring someone else's process. And so I'll do the very best I can to honor what Ms. McClung had done for the years prior, unless, of course, the board decides they would like to substitute this process and do it either at a different time or in a different manner. So I bring that to you today before we start going down through this process. I'd like to just kick it back to the board chair if you have any questions or comments or concerns before we embark on this less formal process.
Let's start with Ms. Patrica, if you're on the phone. Do you have any questions?
Yes, it is difficult for me to follow along because I'm driving, so I can't see who is slotted for which committee. But I will say that I have been serving on DAC for 3 years consecutively, and I would like to have an opportunity to serve on a committee that I have not been with yet, which would be curriculum advisory, construction advisory, or continuous systemic improvement. Those are my comments for now. Chairpersons, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions here before we start? Mr. Fisher, I'll just go down the thing.
Thank you. I know we're about to start the process, but I would ask, and I know it's a workshop, so it's going to be done differently, but essentially to table this until our reorg meeting in November, December, whatever that will be. I think we're just going to kind of run into the same problems, especially when we switch over the board. So every 2 years. I don't know. I think it's because some of us kind of came in again with these slotted positions and we didn't know, scheduling and that stuff, because somebody's schedule now is going to be different depending on what happens, chair and vice chair. So that would be my ask of the board.
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli, do you have anything?
We used to do it like that, and we changed it for the reason that our school year starts in August. And therefore, when the school starts in August, that's when the advisory committees start as well. And that's kind of their cycle. So otherwise, you're changing board members in the middle of their cycle. So that was one reason why. Also, we have with FSBA, that cycle is also done in the summertime, and that process we kind of need to be on. We can't be doing that after the fact, because that's a voted thing in as well as there. It's a vote there. So I think we have to think about. I don't know if you want to split some of this up, but I don't know that you can. I mean, I get that we get new board members in November, late November, but I think just the new ones, when they come in, take the place of the old seats I think is a little bit better situation, because I think it could be confusing to the stakeholders. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Ms. Jordan?
I was going to say some of that, because that is correct. That's how we used to do it. But what I would love to see on this, because when you're looking at this, and this is because I'm just saying it from a person that has seen us for years now, part of this is not even part of the committees. They're not part of the advisory committees. So to me, I think that should be removed from here or separated, because you have audit committee, you have the value adjustment board, that should be up with the actual committees. The other ones are outside, like Coalition for Drug, even though those are important for us to be a part of, they really have nothing to do with advising us. It is just, it's a community, they're community committees, community, whatever you want to call it. The foundation, of course, should be moved up as well. And then even with the FSBA, that's different now too, because FSBA now it's advocacy. So you have to be appointed to be the advocacy person, and then they choose who will be part of the legislation by applying for that through them. Sorry, there's some other things on here too that I was trying. Oh, and the Horizon Council, this says vice chair, which it's not the vice chair, it's the chair. The chair always sits on the Horizon Council. And this one had vice chair on that. And that's not correct even to begin with. And that should be chairpersons on that, which has Member Fisher on this.
Mr. Fisher was my alternate for that. And I had the long-term recovery task force was meeting at exactly the same time. So in order to cover both, as vice chair, I asked him to go to the Horizon Council. That's why. But it's not an automatic for the vice chair, I agree.
Okay, and if I may, we don't have an alternate on this. We never have had one, so that would have been something that should have been brought to the board as having that, or
Well, I
If
would,
you're not, if any of us are not able to attend a meeting, then we send it to our staff, and they send that out, who will take that seats for, who can cover this for us on those particular days. And so that's how we have always done that. That has been the protocol
I
for
would've-
this.
I would have normally agreed, except when it's a position for the chair. I think it would be automatically, just like running the meeting, the chair can't make it, it automatically goes to the vice chair. So that was my thought behind it. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I would think that was the position there. They want either a chair, they want the chair there. They can't have the chair, they'd like to have the vice chair. I would believe it was the thought behind it.
And respectfully, I hear what you're saying. However, that is definitely something that should have come before the board for us to have spoke about that. And Horizon Council, it doesn't say, we are the ones who decided that it's the chair. The Horizon Council, they're not asking if you're the chair or who are you. They just need to know who will be representing. We, as a board, decided that the chair would be that individual that would sit on that seat. So I don't know how that came to be without even coming before us. I'm not sure about that.
Again, when I see chair, I think anytime I can't make it, I go to my vice chair as to go to. But I should have informed you. I apologize for not letting y'all know of that, and I will next time. And if we need to change the policy, we can, or protocol, we can do that. I don't think it's that specific. Ms. Giovanelli?
Well, and actually, I don't know that I was going to, since it was kind of open here for this, I was going to have a discussion because actually the Horizon Council, we've just made it the chair's seat. It could be, I think it could be something that everyone, we could take a turn because it's one a month, or because, it is an opportunity for everyone to be involved, and it's not a chair. The chair really is strictly just to run the meetings, and so that's not a meeting that you run. So, or the chair would run the Horizon Council. So, picks the agenda, which we don't pick the agenda for Horizon Council. So, I would be open to actually seeing if we want to alternate that, like we do some other things. Because I think it's opportunity. We do get to attend some of the Horizon Council meetings because everyone gets invited, and I've gone to a few. We haven't lately. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, but because I have attended some of the meetings before, obviously. So I think that's something to have a conversation if anybody else is interested. Thank you.
And if,
Jordan?
and I
Go
will
ahead.
say, the Horizon Council is open to everybody. It's open to the public, period. But when you look at the education, when they have the people who are representing, so you have all the educational leaders of the colleges as well as the school district. And that's where our person comes into play for that one. And so when I saw that today, I was like, oh, this is absolutely an error because we don't know about this. But that's another thing. So I think that this just needs to be cleaned up as far as separating and that's just my opinion. I don't know what everybody else feels on that. Outside committees that have nothing to do with advising us, just personally that we're involved with these, just like I know I had spoken with Dr. Savage this morning, like the fairgrounds. They just call me, they go, Ms. Jordan, can you please let me know who I need to send this to so our schools can participate? That's the involvement of that. So they just have a person who they send information to, period. And that's why I'm always there for them to send information to. But I don't know what everybody else feels, and that's just my comments for now.
Anyone else have any questions on any of that? Ms. Morgan?
So I do agree that there are two different groups of people, or two different groups of organizations on this chart. One is the advisories, and then the others are the Learning for Life, the Fair Board, Uncommon Friends. If they're not an advisory to us, that's true. But if a board member is sitting there representing the board as a board member, then we need to know who is representing the board and that committee. In other words, so it goes back to me, a lot of this goes back to Mary Fisher. She had passion for certain committees, and she sat on those committees. And it sort of became, so it's a board liaison type thing. Is it? You know, I don't know. And I don't know that we should solve that here, but I think but I think it is a question to have. And that's also what created the Estero Education Committee, because Ms. Patrica was sitting in that committee, and she was asked by members of the committee to speak about the work of the board, and she did, and other board members took exception to that she was the representative. So then we had to put this committee on here to make it official. So I think I don't know what other districts do, you know, for committees beyond advisory committees, and if, you know, you are officially representing the board when you take on some of these responsibilities or not. So anyway, and I do agree with the Horizon Council. We have to decide. It's been chair. That shouldn't change unless the board has agreed to a change in it. And if we're going to change a chair for the Horizon Council, then we ought to think about it for the foundation. I mean, there's no reason all board members shouldn't have an opportunity to go to the foundation meetings and see what the foundation is about, unless the foundation board stipulates that the only person from the district who represents them is the board chair. So, yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
I think Ms. Morgan raised a very interesting and very important point. I would like us to just take under advisement that we have to be careful, because these boards, like the Horizon Council and other people, have their own set of bylaws.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we're in compliance. We're being invited to participate with them as a school board and as a superintendent in some cases. We need to make sure, with the foundation board, happy to do that. With Horizon Council, happy to reach out to Mr. Stevens and get clarification if that's the direction you provide me.
Yes, Ms. Giovanelli?
And just to add to that, like, I'm on a couple other committees that it's not even on this list, like the science fair one. I'm on that, and I would love for someone else that would show interest, because I can still be involved as a judge if somebody else wants to attend some of the meetings. I think they would love for more of us to be involved. So, and would be very open to that. And I would not want to covenant that. You know what I mean? So, I would love to, you know, help with that, you know, if that's possible, if that needs to be added, or, but I agree, separating, that was what I said earlier, was, you know, maybe some of these don't need to be addressed today, but the ones that I think our actual, board advisory committees should be addressed over the summer prior to, because they have a chair, they go through their parliamentary, I mean, all that happens in August for them, most of them. Sometimes it might be September, but when they start back up. But I think that I think we should separate that out. I was trying to think, there was another committee I'm on, STEMtastics. I'm on that through another board, but I mean, and everyone is invited to that on the day of. So, I mean, it's like, you know, all I'm doing is help chairing it, but through this other board that I'm on. So, I mean, I think it's important that we all kind of learn about other things, and also what our specialty is. Like, science really isn't my specialty, but I like judging. So, I mean, but I'm there. So anyways, not to add to this list, but I'm willing to, like I said, share, and I'm willing to, you know, help in that, and how we get there is up to us. Thank you.
Mrs. Bruno first.
The other thing that for the board's consideration is maybe adding to your protocol manual the process that you want to go through for when there is an absence, when you need somebody to cover, because that's not very clear. And the reason I'm saying this is because you do have, for example, the Horizon Council that specifically designates chair to be the person to attend. And when you go back to your protocol manual, it specifically says that the chairperson can provide and delegate duties to the vice chair. So we want to make sure that we're careful in making sure we follow these distinctions, because that's very important, so we don't have this confusion.
May I speak, please?
Yes, you were next on my list.
Excellent, thank you. So I do think that the foundation, and as Attorney Dupree-Bruno just clarified, the Horizon Council are sort of high-profile positions. And I also think that the chair is sort of the face of the board and the spokesperson for the board. And I think it's appropriate for the chair to continue in those roles with those two committees specifically. And chairpersons, I perfectly understand why you designated Vice Chair Fisher, because Robert's rules tell us that if the chair is unavailable to, and as Attorney Dupree-Bruno just said, our protocols tell us if the chair is unavailable, he or she is to designate to the vice chair. So I'm supportive of the decisions that you've made up to this point. I'm also supportive of leaving the chair as the board liaison to those two committees. Those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I also would like to add the long-term recovery task force to this, and that is a chair by their setup, not ours also. And that'll probably be around for at least 5 years is what they're anticipating. So we'll rotate that whoever's chair. Trying to think, do we want to try to table this until later in the summer, possibly? So we get all our committees at the same time, just before the school year, to go through this process. I think it would be my suggestion. We'll open that up for some discussion. Mr. Fisher, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was just having trouble with the mic yet again. I was just going to ask for the same thing, just to table it again. And again, when it comes to starting midway or not, it's going to happen every other year anyway, potentially. So, I mean, it saves 1 year in regard to that. If you're saying that people are not switching out, they potentially could every other year anyway, depending on what happens. So I would renew that motion. Thank you. Or ask. Sorry.
Okay. All in favor of, it's not really a motion, but consensus of tabling this?
Till when?
I would say we want to meet with the new committee before the school year, maybe in August. I think would be a good time.
Okay.
Does that sound good? We'll have to look at our schedule, of course. Mr. Superintendent, do you have any?
I was just going to proffer, you have a workshop scheduled for July 26th. If I'm not mistaken, that would be the next available workshop to us, based upon your July schedule. I may not be 100% accurate, but I do know that 26th is available to us prior to the last board meeting in July.
What's
board meeting
the
usually
first
will occur on
workshop
the
in
31st.
August?
I will get back to you in 2 seconds. While I will look that up, sir.
I think there are people on vacation in July. I'm thinking possibly so. That might not be a good best time.
August 8th is a briefing and board meeting. So the workshop would be August 2nd.
Yeah.
As is currently reflected on the calendar.
Is August 2nd, everybody available? Ms. Patrica, are you available August 2nd?
I will be getting off an airplane at around 5:30 in the morning in Tampa, so I should be able to make it to the district by then.
Thank you. May not be awake, but yes, we'll welcome you here.
Thank you.
Yes,
The other thing for the board's consideration, as well as you're going through your committees, some of these committees are policy-driven, and there are some that are statutory-driven. So I want to make sure that the board is aware, for example, the School Health Advisory Committee, that will be statutory-driven, or the Value Adjustment Board, that's also statutory-driven. So I just want to make sure that the board is aware of that.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
yes.
Dr. Savage, I hope you're taking copious notes. I think that I'm hearing from the board pretty clearly that we need to revise the structure out of an alphabetical order. I know audit committee clearly was added very late and not re-alphabetized. But I think we need to break them into those types of sections, which are very specific to the advisory committees. Then we host the outside committees and make a notation of whether, and you and I can get together and confirm with those two entities, in particular the Foundation, the Rising Council, what the expectation of their bylaws are. And then, to Kathy's point, label them also with a simple S, as if they're statutory. I mean, we can come up with a modeling system, but if you can capture that thought, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right. Any other questions, anyone? Thank you. Dr. Savage?
Thank you very much. You saved us a little bit of time at the end of that piece. For the board's edification, I do believe that the way, even though it wasn't labeled as such, I believe that this was, again, just taken, I didn't create this form, this is just taken the same exact form. All the board advisories that are specific to the district, that are created specifically as board advisories, those are the top 6 items, and then there's a slight break that's visible, very, very slight, that you can see, and then they have the 2 that have 2-year terms that are defined as 2 years, then they have another little break, and then they have kind of the amalgam of that group. So I think the feedback that I heard, and then Dr. Bernier kind of recapped, which I was, definitely he's right on with the notes that I was taking on this. The thought process is kind of organizing in the way that really makes sense, so that there's an awareness, like in the case of what Ms. Jordan mentioned earlier about ones that they literally just have to kick off an event. They don't actually have to meet ever, really, that we can denote this in a way that makes sense to everyone. And but then also to Ms. Morgan's point, there's an awareness of all these particular areas in which the board is acting that piece. And to Ms. Giovanelli's point, there are additional ones that can be added. The only thing I would ask is that if you, as a board member, presently know that you serve in a capacity that you would like to make available for other people to participate, and as Ms. Giovanelli had said earlier, that please bring that to us so that we're aware of it, so that individually we know, and then we can make it all inclusive, but then categorize in a way that makes sense. So that's the only thing I would ask, just to help us in that task. And then we'll be ready, certainly long before, we'll probably have some material for the one-to-ones, so you can react to it. That way, by the time we come back in August 2nd, we'll be ready to go. And that's all I had, Superintendent.
Ms. Jordan?
Dr. Savage, because the audit committee, we had added that one, that was not part of us before. And then the independent sales, surtax oversight, that's absolutely what we're a part of. Instructional calendar, we have to have somebody on there, and then the insurance task force. They're mixed in with here, but we still
Yes.
have people, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Next item on the agenda is review of the June 13th regular agenda. Dr. Bernier? Thank you again, Dr. Savage.
My pleasure.
Currently, I don't have any questions regarding the agenda.
But I do pass.
Okay. I do not have any written submissions for questions that I need to address, but I'd be open to collecting any questions that you may have. If I can provide answers, I will be happy to. If I need staff to respond, we'll get that to you in the update.
Okay. Any questions for the superintendent? Ms. Giovanelli, I guess you would have some.
I have some, and I apologize, I had sent an email and it's lost, so, with computer issues, so we don't, they're looking at it, but they're gonna, if they find it, which they probably will, it'll be after we've done this. But I went back through real quick and highlighted, I'm just trying to get there, to my list, because I actually went back through it, so just give me 1 second to get there, because I think there's just 3. And it was just, they're kind of basic. I promise. Just me 1 second. Because it's under that draft and I gotta. There. There we go. As I go down, because they're highlighted now, so. I know one was regarding the, let me see which one it is. Well, didn't, oh, there it is. Okay, it took a minute to highlight. Number F on the board office, F4. I just, that is the VAM appointment. I'm just a little concerned only because we only had one applicant, and I even sent that out to a lot of people. My concern really is, are we reaching all stakeholders? I feel like this is an example that we're actually not doing that because we didn't have a lot of participation. And so I don't know what we can do better. That was my biggest concern, because I would have thought that this would have had many applications, and we had one. So I mean, that was, and I apologize for not being here earlier because of the computer thing, but that was one of the things that where I don't think that we're reaching stakeholders, and we all should have made a really extra hard effort. And I sent it out to numerous people in the community and also gave it to the Board of Realtors. He sent it out to every realtor in Lee County that is on the Board of Realtors. I would have thought one of them would have applied. Now, I did hear back from one that said he attempted to do so and he had a hard time. It wasn't taking his application. I don't know if he was doing it later. I don't know. And at this point, to me, it's irrelevant because we do have an applicant. But I think that we have, this is a perfect example that, are we reaching all stakeholders? I don't believe we are. And that has really nothing to do with the superintendent, because I believe this is on us as a board, not as the district, to find that applicant. Because this is one of the few things that we have, and we're missing the target, in my opinion. And that's all I really wanted to say about that.
One moment, Melissa, before you go on. Mr. Bruno?
Yes, I just wanted to also point to the board that with regards to your board advisory committees, the same type of thing is happening where you're not getting the applicants and there's a struggle to fill spots.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Giovanelli.
And in my opinion, we need to be working really hard at that. So that's really all I have. Anybody wants to have comments, it's up to y'all.
Ms. Jordan.
The only comment I would have, you just sat there and told us how many people you reached out to.
But I did.
Did not receive any. I'm sure we're all doing the same. Again, we cannot force. And I remember having a conversation just yesterday about the, as Mr. Bruno just stated, we don't even have people putting in applications for our committees. So I know I personally went out to everywhere I could possibly think of and shared the information and shared that, the website, the application as well. So I think we're all doing our job. It's just, you can't force people to fill them out.
Well, but we have to relook at this. We're doing something. We got to change up what we're doing. It's just not working. So I don't know if we're not approachable, if we're not welcoming. I don't know. I mean, why wouldn't people want to be involved in the education of children? So, I mean, I just think, I don't know. I think we have to rethink this. I think we have to, this should be part of our strategic plan as far as how we're meeting the people where they're at and making it, I want to see a line, a long line for people wanting not to come in here to yell at us, to come to be a part of us. I don't know, but I just trying to express that. I think it's important.
Ms. Jordan?
Just real quick, a lot of that is because the fact that we changed, or it was changed where if you are participating, you will now be videoed and everybody will see you and hear you. People want to volunteer, people want to come, they do not want to be all over the lead TV. Just, that's the truth right there.
Mr. Fisher?
Honestly, for me, and I've asked a ton of people, my peers, it's time. It's, I mean, people, as happy as sport children, they have children, but at least the ones I talk to, I mean, it's a time thing. They're on so many other committees and so many other different things in life. So, I mean, for me, that's what it is.
Okay. Ms. Fleming, anything?
I actually will reiterate exactly what Mr. Fisher just said. Maybe it's because, the people I have approached are with children in school right now because they, and that's something they're very concerned about, but like most with children in school right now, have very limited time to do anything extra. I have heard several people say they would be on another committee, but that's just not something that they're interested in. So that's all I have on that.
Ms. Morgan, you look like you're deep in thought.
Well, no, I mean, I agree that putting people, Value Adjustment Board is a public meeting, so, and I don't know whether they film it or not, but our advisory meetings are filmed, and I know that people object to participating in meetings that can be edited and put on social media. Maybe, I mean, Value Adjustment Board meets twice a year for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Maybe we're not being clear about the extent of the obligation. It's not like our advisory committees where they meet once a month and the commitment can be 1 to 2 hours. Other than that, I don't know what to say. Thank you.
Ms. Patrica, do you have any comments?
No, I don't think I have any comments on this. I do agree that the videotaping has been, at least with my constituents, a reason not to be on an advisory committee. I don't know the answer to increasing public participation in these committees beyond getting rid of that requirement. Those are my comments. Thank you.
On the Value Adjustment Board, they have 2 citizens on the board, one of which must be there. So if there's only one on there right now, there's not another meeting scheduled till quite a while. So, Ms. Bruno, when we have to have that in?
So my understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that they're reorganizing in June. So they're expecting the board to provide its appointee. We were hoping for the June 13th meeting because they'll be organizing this month.
Is it too late for any other applicants to get in if they were to hear this, or?
I will follow the board's direction. We can contact them, but
Yeah, okay, just, Ms. Morgan?
Well, I would suggest to the Value Adjustment Board that we keep it open,
Yeah.
the application process open.
And we all
Yeah.
work a little hard on seeing if we can get some more applicants in very quickly here. If everybody will make that a priority. I know you've done a lot already, but it might take a personal phone call.
Exactly, identify somebody.
Okay. Any other questions for, oh yes, Ms. Bruno.
now, if the board is going to do that, may I request that we really try to push this week to try to see what we can do to get some additional applicants, please?
Okay, will do. Okay, any other questions from anyone? Yes, Ms. Gibson?
Yeah, I've got a couple more. It's also, this one is the consent business services, I think it's 8, and it's just regarding the official property records. Really, my question is, I get this asked a lot, so this is really for the public. Dr. Bernier, if you could just answer or explain what happens to the items once, when they dispose of them, like, do we sell them, and when if we recover any monies for the loss, for any of the loss of the items, that kind of thing, just to update on that, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ivanelli, for the question. I think it's really important for the public to understand what it means to be a good steward of the public tax dollar. First of all, these items are not lost. That's the nice part. These are approval of items that have lived past their lifespan. And we have updated very specifically at the board members' requests the information contained in the worksheet so you can see its purchase price and some other information related to what happens. It depends upon the item. Some items are well beyond repair, but in other cases with some of the technology items, we are able to sell those items and provide them. There's also the opportunity in other cases where we have online auctions. IT works very hard. We try to recover as much money as possible, and I will ask our staff to give us an idea from this particular one so that when we are done with that process, we'll give the board an update regarding the dollars that may have been recouped. Again, it's significant, and I don't recall the worksheets right off the top of my head. I apologize. But there's a number of things. Go back one more click. Yeah, there are a number of things on here, and I mean, I even had questions in cabinet when I was talking about the bus. You know, what's the situation with the bus and what it was purchased for and what its current value is. That bus in particular has been completely gutted for parts, right? Before we release a bus, a starter, a spark plug wire, a seat, you know, whatever we can claim from those buses are claimed before they go out to surplus. So that's just one example of some of the items. And then as I recall, there were a number of whiteboards. That is due to the upgrade in the smart boards, but those smart boards do have a potential value out on the market for somebody who may be starting a different type of school or a charter school who might want to have that equipment that sees it an upgrade for themselves, where we're in a different position.
Thank you. One more.
Okay.
And actually, this is just regarding the Fort Myers High School's football field. They've raised money, and if you could just enlighten the public on that they raised the money for the field, and then my questions really are is when will they commence to start working on the field, and when is the completion? And my main concern is that we're now in rainy season, so I'm a little worried that we won't meet football season schedule, but basically when they anticipate to be done. Thank you.
Is this an agenda item? Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. It is A, I think A, let me see. It is L, consent operations, and I think it's L8, yeah, the turf.
Oh, yeah.
So as we know, Fort Myers High School took a grant and received a grant from the NFL, specifically through the Miami Dolphins, to replace their natural field with a synthetic turf field. There are two projects in this project. One is the actual field, and the other is the track, which will be done at the same time. These projects are expected to break full ground in June. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the date is June 15th for the groundbreaking. That was delayed due to additional drainage that was necessary and a change to a retention pond. The city permitting, because turf field is not as permeable as grass, there is an opportunity here for us to, we're going to have to install additional drainage and expand a retention pond either just on or just off-site. That being said, once we know the start date and we're sure that the June 15th groundbreaking is full, I can get back to you with the expected date of completion. Our hope would be that we would be done by summer and be open for the fall, but based upon some of the delays that were partially responsible to raising the additional funds. Fort Myers High School had to come up with the additional funding, and they had to work with donors, but they do have all the money. All the money is now here at the school district to pay the bills moving forward to make sure this project happens. So we are green lighting and moving forward, and we'll do the very best we can.
Yes.
One more question, because this is something that you know, because Orange County had several, right?
One.
Or was it Las Vegas? I don't remember
We
which,
had
but
one synthetic field in my former life in Orange County that was built this way, and we went to full synthetic fields at all of our high schools in Las Vegas, but that was due to the water district rebating us for not having to water grass. There's a significant water shortage. We could loan them some water every afternoon about 4 o'clock.
the maintenance on this, since you're familiar with that, can you explain that? And do you have any idea what it's annual or is it every 5 years? What is like involved in that? please?
I don't have everything. I can tell you that all fields have to be maintained, whether natural grass or synthetic turf. Synthetic turf requires specific maintenance at a regular maintenance schedule. Some of it is annual. Some of it is a couple of times during the year in terms of, I call it fluffing making the surface playable. It's not just like mowing the grass. There's still work that has to be done regularly on the field. There's annual, and then there's regular inspections of the field, and that's referred to something called a bounce test. The field must absorb so much shock. Once it doesn't, then either the field has to be renovated or removed. I do want the public to know that this is not necessarily, this particular item is not for the field. This particular item, the $1.5 million, is the district's commitment to the polyurethane track project. So we're doing this joint. We didn't want to put in a field and then come back and do a track and destroy a field, and we didn't want to do a track and then come in and do a field. So these projects will be occurring simultaneously. June 15th kickoff, and I will get, if everything stays on track, I'll get you an anticipated completion date.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. Go to the good of the order. Ms. Patrica, do you have anything?
No, thank you, sir.
Mrs. Giovanelli?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Jordan?
You missed.
I'll come back
Okay,
to
I'm
you.
like, I felt bad. I'm like, I do not have anything. Thank you very much.
I'm just going by my script here. Mr. Morgan?
Mr. or Mrs.?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Mr. Fisher. Sorry.
You're really throwing me.
I know. Y'all look a lot like.
Now I'm out of order, so now I'm all, no. Before this, before this meeting, I was able to attend the Trafalgar Middle promotion ceremony. Is that what it's called?
You can say graduation.
Graduation. I wasn't supposed to say that, I guess. So that was a great time. Best wishes to the 8th graders from there and all the 8th graders. And I just want to wish all the students, staff, teachers, administrators a happy, healthy, safe, and restful summer. Thank you.
Miss Morgan, so we're jumping all around here.
I have no comments, thank you.
Ms. Fleming?
I was anxious to go before Mr. Morgan. Because Mr. Fisher stole my, no, I just want to say have a safe summer to all the students and all of our staff, and thank you for all you do. This is one summer that is well-deserved, so I hope that they rest up and are excited to be back in the fall. That's all I have.
All right. I have no comments at this time.
Mrs. Parsons?
So, Mr. Superintendent, anything else you'd like to add?
Just right now, the way this currently works, the track will be done in December. The football field is scheduled to be completed prior to the start of the season. But Ms. Giovanelli raises a very interesting point. Rain will drive part of that project and whether there are delays or not. I too would also like to wish our faculties, our staff, and our principals, and mostly our students and families, a very safe summer. We have some great summer programming going on. Some of our seniors were back immediately following graduation, working on those graduation requirements. We will have a summer program for those seniors, and we will have a August graduation for those who could successfully complete the requirements. Looking forward to getting you invited to that. And we're beginning in earnest with some of our juniors, now rising seniors, to work on that. Want to take the opportunity to thank Skyline Elementary today for the opportunity to go visit there. It was interesting to see the energy of our young people and our teachers as well. Everyone looks a little tired, but they were strangely energized because they knew tomorrow morning would be different. So congratulations to the school buildings and their hard work. Looking forward to getting all their test data and all that information, sharing it with you this summer. And lastly, one thing to expect as we move into the summer is you'll get an update on the 10-year plan regarding building and construction. And remember, we're working very hard to integrate two things. You often hear me talk about the shiny new penny. Those are the brand-new school buildings that we build. And those are really important because they maximize growth and they give us the opportunity to ensure that our students are well educated. But we also have real hard renovation work to do. We've been renovating Lemuel Teal, which will open this fall. We have been renovating Franklin Park, which will open when it's completed. We're starting the work at Cypress Lake Middle School, and the next one that'll rise to the surface will be Bonita Springs. So based upon a facilities index score, not just a guess, those were our neediest buildings, and we're now into number 4, and we will give you 5 and 6 and give you the idea of not just the new buildings, but where we need to go and renovate as well. So it'll still be, even though we're getting off to summer, it will be a busy summer, and looking forward to spending some time with some of you over the next several days at the Florida School Boards and joint conference with the Florida Superintendents. So thank you.
Pray,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman. I would ask that the board please be prepared to provide some direction with regards to the taping of the board advisory committees in August, so that staff knows how to move forward and whether or not that will assist with recruitment. So we would appreciate some direction on that. It is not statutorily required. It's something that we have been doing.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other business before us, we will now adjourn. The time is 1:53 p.m.